Welcome to the Design Portal BootCamp lesson on statistics. brainCloud has two types of statistics, user statistics and global statistics. Global statistics are centrally stored and accessible by all the app's users, whereas user statistics are instead owned and only accessible by the user. Let's define some statistics on the Design Portal. On the left, click Cloud Data, then Global Statistics. To create a global statistic, click the plus button on the right. Enter a name for the statistic. This name cannot contain spaces. Then, optionally, enter a category. You can select the data type of the statistic. The options are a long or a double. Enter a description for the statistic. You can also set the minimum and maximum values for the statistic as well as its initial value. We'll leave these as the default values. Click Save. Click the plus button to create another global statistic. Give the statistic a name, category, and description. Click Save. Click the plus button to create one more global statistic. Give the statistic a name, category, and description. Click Save. We now have 3 global statistics set up. Let's set up some user statistics. On the left, click User Statistics. On the right, click the plus button to create a user statistic. You'll notice that we have the exact same options for the user statistic with one addition, the merge action. The merge action only applies if your game allows user accounts to be merged. For example, if a user creates a profile with one identity type, say email and password, and later creates another account using a different identity type, like universal, brainCloud has the capability to merge these accounts. The merge action option defines how the profile merge would affect the user statistics. There are 2 options, take primary and additive. The take primary action will take the stat of the main profile that survives the merge, whereas the additive action will sum the profile's 2 stats together and create a new value. For this statistic, enter the name, category, and description. Click Save. Click the plus button to create another user statistic. Enter the name, category, and description. Click Save. Click the plus button to create one more user statistic. Enter the name, category, and description. Click Save. We have 3 user statistics set up. Now let's explore some of the statistics API calls in the API Explorer. First, let's authenticate. From the Service drop-down list, select Global Game Statistics. From the Operations drop-down list, select Read All Global Stats. This request does not require any parameters. Click Execute to make the request. All the global statistics that we set up and their values were returned in this response. This request is useful for getting all the global statistics in a single request. There are 2 more Read Statistic requests that I want to show you. From the Operations drop-down list, select Read Global Stats for category. In the Parameters section, enter Gameplay as the category value. Click Execute to make the request. Only the global statistics with the gameplay category were returned in this response. This request is useful for getting all the statistics for a particular category in a single request. From the Operations drop-down list, select Read Global Stats subset. In the Parameters section, enter the statistic names that you want returned. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, only the statistics that we requested were returned. This request is useful for retrieving the statistic value of specific statistics. From the Operations drop-down list, select Increment Global Stats. In the Parameters section, enter the name of one of the statistics and then enter a value to increment by. You can also enter a negative number to decrement the statistic by. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, the global statistic that was incremented was returned with its updated value. Here's the great part about this request. You can pass in multiple statistics to increment. In your game or app, you can keep track of all the statistic increments and then, when appropriate, send all the increments at once to save on API calls. In the Parameters section, add a comma after the first statistic and add a second statistic to increment. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, both statistics that were incremented were returned with their updated values. The flexibility of statistics doesn't end here. In the API reference, there's a section called Statistics Grammar. These are special operations that the process statistics request can perform. As we scroll through the list of operations, we can see some really useful functionality here. Let's head back to the Design Portal and test a couple of these out in the API Explorer. From the drop-down list, select Process Statistics. In the Parameters section, we're going to reset the elapsed time statistic, and we're going to set the total currency earned statistic to 9. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, both statistics that were modified were returned with their updated values. From the Operations drop-down list, select Read All Global Stats. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, you'll see the current value for each statistic. If you want to see the global statistic values without running the read all user stats request from the API Explorer, you can. On the left, click Global, then Global Data, followed by Global Statistics. On this screen, you'll find all the global statistics that you've defined and their current values. Clicking a statistic, a side pane will pop out from the right. Clicking Edit will allow you to modify a statistic's value, in case that's something you need to do. Now let's look at the user stats request in the API Explorer. On the left, click Design, then Cloud Code, followed by API Explorer. I'm going to clear the logs, but it's an optional step. From the Service drop-down list, select Player Statistics. From the Operations drop-down list, select Read All User Stats. This request doesn't take any parameters. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, all the user statistics were returned. Like global statistics, you can request user statistics by category. From the Operations drop-down list, select Read User Stats for category. In the Parameters section, enter Gameplay as the category value. Click Execute to make the request. Only the user statistic with the gameplay category was returned in the response. Again, like global statistics, you can request a subset of user statistics. From the Operation drop-down list, select Read User Stats subset. In the Parameter section, enter the user statistic names that you want returned. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, only the requested user statistics were returned. From the Operations drop-down list, select Increment User Stats. In the Parameter section, enter the name of one of the user statistics and then enter a value to increment it by. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, the user statistic that was incremented was returned with its updated value. In the Parameter section, add a comma after the first statistic and add a second user statistic to increment. Click Execute to make the request. In the response, both the user statistics that were incremented were returned with their updated values. From the Operations drop-down list, notice that there is a method here called Reset All User Stats. It simply resets all the user statistics to their initial value. We aren't going to invoke it, but it's useful to know it exists. There's also the Process Statistics request. We aren't going to invoke it either, but it works the exact same way as the Global Statistics equivalent. You can view each user's user statistics from the Users tab. On the left, click Users, then User Browser. Click the top user in the list, then on the side pane, click Go to User. On the left, click Data, then Statistics. On this screen, you'll find all the user statistics that you've defined and their current values for this user. If you click a statistic, you can edit and modify the value just like we did for global statistics. Dynamically creating statistics is the next lesson in the Design Portal BootCamp.